Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I can safely assume whiskey drinkers. Thank you for tuning in. On behalf of Manila House, this is Bambina Olivares, the Director of Programming, welcoming members and guests alike to today's online masterclass with Sagamore Spirit Rye Whiskey, led by no less than Brian Treacy, President of Sagamore USA. We are all familiar with malts and Scotch whiskies, but rye whiskies, I confess, I don't know much about. So it is indeed a pleasure to have this opportunity to learn more about Sagamore and what makes rye whiskey different and just as satisfying to drink. So let's get a sip of the rye. Guiding us tonight is your host, Whiskey Ambassador Kris Ong, who will share the screen with Brian, who is up bright and early with us to be with us from the USA this evening. I'd like to give special thanks to Quen Bigo of Sagamore, Philippines for making this happen. Before we begin, just a few ground rules. This masterclass is in meeting format and is being recorded and will be up on the Manila House YouTube channel in a day or two with your consent. Please let us know if you don't. I would suggest that you perhaps turn off your videos if you don't want to come out in the YouTube video. Please use the chat box or unmute yourselves if you have any comments as we go along. We'd like this to be an interactive event. And a reminder to everyone, Manila House is open to all fully vaccinated members and their guests. So please come by with proof of vaccination. Our takeaway service is also open to the public. So please call us at 0917-816-3685 to place your orders. I know you're all eager to start this tasting session and you have your 3 mini bottles of Sagamore ready, as well as the 3 dishes created by Chef Pia of Manila House to enhance the flavor profiles of the whiskeys. By the way, the full-size bottle of whiskeys will be available to purchase from Manila House after the event. So stay tuned too for a special raffle after the last pairing. So Kris, over to you.
Hello, thank you so much, Bambina, for your kind introduction. I'd like to acknowledge Bambina, obviously. She is the director of the PR and Arts for the Culture and Education Program of Manila House. I'd also like to acknowledge Miss Arcee, who is their marketing head, and obviously Miss Quen Bigo from Sagamore, Philippines. I would like to welcome you all this evening. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us on this evening and enjoying these great whiskeys with us and enjoying this great food. I'm going to be your host for this evening, but it goes to show that our presenter this evening is someone very, very special. His name is Brian Treacy. He is the Sagamore Spirit. He's the president of basically Sagamore Spirit. This man came from an entrepreneur background and found himself basically into the rye business, and Sagamore was lucky enough to pick him up. And since then, he's been part of pretty much all the operations, all the daily operations of Sagamore. I've worked with this man before with our previous tasting with Sagamore, and he is a wealth of knowledge. So for all of you that have a lot of questions, which I hope all of you do, because this is the right man to talk to. So without further ado, Mr. Brian Treacy.
Well, thank you all. Thank you very much, Kris. Thank you, Manila House. Thank you, Quinby. Thank you all for joining. I'm like a little hot and sweaty. I've got all this pressure on me now. That was a heck of an introduction. So thank you very, very much. Kris, always great to work with you as well. So yeah, I'm going to be sharing my screen and kind of taking you through a little bit of a presentation. Kind of give you an idea a little bit about who Sagamore Spirit is, why we chose rye whiskey as our product to make. Talk to you a little bit about what makes our products unique and different. Talk a little bit about our process and so forth, and of course, sip on some whiskey and eat some great food. And as mentioned earlier, if you have questions, please throw them in the chat. I don't always notice them, but Kris is really great about noticing. Quincy's really great about noticing them. And we love when people ask questions. And of course, we'll be happy to answer them. I've been here since day one, so I usually can answer them. If not, we'll tell you a great joke or something instead. So we'll get started now, if that's all right. Let me know if you can see that. All right. So one of the things that I think a lot of folks may or may not know about rye whiskey, and really kind of being the original American whiskey, that it was born right here in the mid-Atlantic of the United States in Maryland, D.C., Pennsylvania, and Virginia. So Maryland and Baltimore, Maryland, specifically where we're based out of, is the birthplace of American whiskey. And one of the reasons that a lot of folks don't know is we have a rich history that goes back with distilling to the 1600s. At the time, it was predominantly rum, though. We would get a tremendous amount of sugars and molasses out of the British West Indies and so forth. But eventually, like a lot of things, the government gets involved and things start to take a change. And so we end up having what was called the Molasses Tax Act of 1733. And we started getting hit with taxes and tariffs on all those British sugars and molasses that we were importing. And so we didn't really want to pay those taxes and tariffs. We just wanted a good dram. And so instead, we had a lot of resourceful people. So Baltimore, Maryland is located right on the inner harbor of the Chesapeake Bay. So it was second to Ellis Island for immigration into the United States. We had a lot of people coming in from Germany, Poland, Scotland, Ireland, who knew how to distill grain-based type products. And we're very resourceful folks. And we grew a tremendous amount of rye grain as a cover crop when we weren't growing tobacco. And so being resourceful people and not wanting to pay taxes and tariffs, by about the mid-1730s, we were no longer distilling any rum and really distilling nothing but rye whiskey going forward. And so that history of distilling, that goes back 1600s, that's 158 years before Kentucky was even a state. And so as we begin to distill nothing but rye whiskey, as time goes on, our relationship with the British tends to worsen. We have a little something called the Revolutionary War in the United States, and we come out of that $54 million in debt. And the folks in the U.S. government decided a good way to pay down that debt that we had from the war was to start taxing these tariffs and raising excise taxes on these historic distilleries that we had throughout the country, and especially throughout Maryland. And of course, again, we didn't want to necessarily pay all those heavy taxes. So we started having what was called the rumblings of the Whiskey Rebellion, where the distilleries started an uprising against the U.S. government and paying those taxes. And that started in the 1780s. And that's when folks with the names such as Mary and Jacob Beam from the Beam family, Jim Beam, and Basil Hayden, all these legendary distillers that moved to that are now famous for being Kentucky bourbons actually started here in Maryland. And that's something the folks in Kentucky don't necessarily like to tell you, but a lot of the distilleries, families in Kentucky actually started in Maryland, but they moved to Kentucky because at the time in the 1780s, it wasn't a developed state yet. So they could escape George Washington's army and not pay those taxes and tariffs and continue to make whiskey without paying any of that. But luckily, as time goes on, the Whiskey Rebellion ends peacefully. And by 1792, Kentucky's a state, and whiskey begins to really flourish here in the United States. And so, Kentucky, Maryland, Pennsylvania start becoming the leading producers of whiskey in the United States. And then as you fast forward through the 1800s, Maryland became really famous for being a very superior rye whiskey. We had the Civil War, so we had a tremendous amount of people moving and transitioning up and down through Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia during that time. And that's when Maryland really was discovered as being a superior rye whiskey, was known as really being the best rye whiskey out there. And you fast forward to this is a picture of our state here in 1910. And we had 44 licensed distilleries, 21 in downtown Baltimore, all making rye whiskey. And we kept making rye whiskey actually through Prohibition. And that's one of the reasons Maryland's called the Free State. And then eventually we come out of Prohibition and then come to 1930s. And then the government kind of started subsidizing corn and paying farmers to stop growing rye grain to help gear up ethanol production for World War II. And that's and a lot of the distilleries in Maryland switched over to ethanol production to help support the war. Over half of the 550 million gallons of ethanol production to support World War II came from the distilleries here in the U.S. And unfortunately, after the war, it never made much of a comeback. And our last distillery closed its doors here in Maryland in 1982. And then that name got sold off to a big Kentucky distillery called Heaven Hill and is known as Pikesville Rye. So if you're familiar with Heaven Hill and some of their brands, Elijah Craig, so forth, they also bought these brands up. And we thought it was really interesting that that reputation of Maryland-style rye and that brand, that identity of Maryland-style rye could live on for decades without anybody in Maryland actually doing it. And even the distilleries in Kentucky and other states such as Colorado and New England were making Maryland-style rye. And we thought that was just a really neat piece of history. And that's kind of one of the reasons we got inspired, Sagamore, to get inspired to go ahead and start our distillery. We found these great articles. It talks about Maryland rye brings higher prices. It talks about the quality of the water imparts to the liquor a flavor that it doesn't get elsewhere. And the barometric pressure in this area is more conducive to sound fermentation. And for that reason, Maryland rye is much more highly prized than made in Illinois, New England, or Canada. This was kind of written before Kentucky was even a state, so they didn't have Kentucky. And then you talk about, here's a great article, it talks about exporting 2,000 barrels of whiskey to the English in Scotland, and it talks about bringing it down from the Cockeysville Distillery, which is just north of downtown Baltimore, located close to our farm, Sagamore Farm, and it talks about to throw the hijackers off their guard. Tell them the liquor is coming from Kentucky, because the whiskey from Kentucky was not considered to be as good as the whiskey from Maryland. But the vessel will have to have extra guards to watch its cargo to protect it from pirates while at sea, because this was such highly prized whiskey. They knew there was a chance the ship would get robbed. And then here's a table of content that shows the whiskey held in bond in 1912. You can see Kentucky now is very much a front leader. 140 million gallons, Pennsylvania 38 million gallons, Maryland almost 20 million gallons, and Indiana at 14 million gallons. And so these were the leading distilling states in the United States. And then you fast forward as we come out of Prohibition, though, and since Maryland was still distilling through Prohibition, in 1936, Maryland held 110 million gallons now at this time, and that was 1/3 of the entire nation's supply of whiskey. And so, since we continue to distill through Prohibition, we ended up becoming a real powerhouse coming out of Prohibition. So, these legendary brands that existed, Hunter's Rye, Lanahan Rye, Pikesville Rye, a lot of them got bought up by the Kentucky distilleries. And as time went on, it's just a shame because a lot of folks don't realize that they think American whiskey, they think Kentucky. But we often call rye whiskey bourbon's older brother because the original American whiskey is actually rye whiskey and not bourbon. Basil Hayden and those guys were actually making rye whiskey in Maryland, but when they moved down south to Kentucky, they didn't have access to the grains like rye as much as they did just corn. So they just switched over their mash bills. And that's why, Jim Beam, Basil Hayden, they're high rye bourbons. They wanted still that rye grain, but they just couldn't get as much. So that's kind of the quick little background on, Sagamore, like what inspired Sagamore to get into the game and why we call it Maryland style rye and why we're so focused in on rye whiskey. So let's talk a little bit about what is rye whiskey, what makes our mash bills a little bit different. So as you guys probably know, what mash bills are. They are, somebody go on mute. I'm getting some feedback. There we go. Thank you. So what are our mash bills? What's Maryland style rye? What is a straight rye whiskey? What makes our whiskey unique and different? And so, if you're familiar with a straight bourbon, a bourbon has to be at least 51% corn in its mash bill. After that, it can be rye, malted barley, wheat, whatever it may be, but it has to be at least 51% corn to be a bourbon. Well, to be a rye whiskey, we have to be at least 51% rye grain in our mash bill or recipe to be a rye whiskey. And then after that, we can do corn or wheat or malted barley or whatever we would like, but it has to be at least 51%. So we distill actually what we consider to be two straight rye mash bills. We distill one that is 95% rye, 5% malted barley, and we age this anywhere from 4 to 8 years, depending on the product. And then we distill one we call our barely legal rye, right? So barely legal because it's only 52% rye, right? You have to be at least 51. So 52% rye, 43% corn, and 5% malted barley. And we age that separately 4 to 8 years, depending on the product. And then every one of those products that we have has a blend of those two straight ryes. And the reason we do that, as you may know already or may not, rye grain is known to be a spicier grain than compared to corn. And when we say spicier, not necessarily like jalapeno or habanero, but more like the baking spices, your clove, your cinnamon, your mint, your nutmeg, those types of spices that we might associate with like some of the baking spices. Corn and malt tend to put off sweeter notes. So a lot of times we'll get fruity and floralness from those. And Maryland was always kind of known as a sweeter, more approachable rye whiskey. Monongahela style, which is north of us, like Pennsylvania, was always 100% rye grain. So it was known as big, bold, spicy rye whiskey. Maryland, because it had this balance of mash bills, was known as a really nice, rounded, balanced, layered rye whiskey. So we'll get that kind of spice that we associate, and then we get, like I said, like these nice layers in there a lot of times to bring out these fruit and floral notes that give it some interesting balance to it, and some citrus notes and things along those lines. So that's kind of what Maryland style rye is known to be, and that's a little bit about our products that makes it unique and different. The fact that we distill two different mash bills, and then every product has a blend of those two straight ryes, and then we proof everything using 100% of the limestone spring water from our farm, Sagamore Farm, that's located just north of our distillery in downtown Baltimore. So I've gone on quite a bit here for a while. And you got to try to get into some whiskeys. I'm sure I appreciate you guys being so patient and getting that background about Maryland style rye in our products. But probably time to jump into our signature rye whiskey. So this one will be, I believe, you'll have the white label. You'll have one with a white label, one with a blue label, one with a black label. We'll start with one with the white label. This is our signature rye. It's 41.5% ABV. It's aged 4 to 6 years. And like I said, it's got a blend of those two straight ryes. And what we like about this, since it's kind of a lower ABV, it's really easy to drink. It's really very sippable. Tastes great neat. Tastes great with rocks. Still tastes great in a Manhattan or old fashioned. It's got enough of that spice and backbone in it to stand up in a cocktail. But again, Maryland was known as a very approachable whiskey, and that's kind of what we were striving for in this. And they were typically anywhere from 40% or 43% ABV. So historically, we kind of split it right down the middle at 41.5% ABV. So, this one, you can see the tasting notes there, but I'm going to kind of pause there and let you guys sip on it a little bit. We can talk about the tasting notes. We can talk about the food and the pairing and so forth. And again, thank you all for coming out today.
Awesome, Brian. Really, really great knowledge. As I said to you guys earlier, this man is a wealth of knowledge. You could tell that he loves his job and he knows his history. But Miss Bambina, would you mind describing the first course that we paired with this expression, please?
Sure. When we saw the flavor notes of this particular signature rye whiskey, our chef was inspired to pair it with meat because of the depth of flavor. And what you're going to taste right now is hot smoked Wagyu beef tataki with spicy sauce. So that is obviously a Japanese kind of approach to cooking meat with the spice. And I think it all balances out in the end, don't you think, Kris?
Absolutely, Miss Bambino. Unfortunately for you guys, I was able to try everything a lot earlier just because I wanted to come into this tasting and describe to you guys how my opinion is on how the chef paired these spirits. Obviously, as Miss Bambina said, we were able to pair this with a Wagyu beef. Wagyu, as you all know, is a Japanese beef. It's beef that is massaged, it's fed sake, and it's actually very high in fat, which makes their meat very, very tender. Now, when you have something like a high kind of fat content beef, you want a spirit that has a good amount of acidity and citrus that cuts through that. So in the Filipino term, hindi siya nakakaumay, or in English, it doesn't kind of overwhelm itself. So I feel as if, in addition to the rye spices and the type of herbs and dill type of flavors that came in the Sagamore Spirit, the Sagamore signature, it went really, really well with that fine, subtle yet complex flavor of the Wagyu beef. So that's once again, that's just my opinion. I hope that our audience kind of had the same flavor profiles. Obviously, the best thing for me to do was you take a sip of rye first, enjoy all the things all the flavors that it gives you, and then go ahead and try a little bit of the beef. And while you're chewing it and you just swallow it, while all that nice umami flavor is in your mouth, go ahead and take another sip of rye and see how those flavors type of like kind of contrast and give each other a distinction between them.
So, Kris, would you say that you could have this with a glass? You could probably have this beef tataki with a glass of Sagamore signature spirit while you're having dinner?
Miss Bambina, I could have this Wagyu beef every day. It's that good. But yes, absolutely. As I said, the Sagamore Spirit, the signature, it has a very nice citrus profile. At the same time, it has those herbaceousness that rye is very known for. And as I said, the acidity of that rye, it cuts right through that fatty coating that the beef leaves on your tongue, and it goes really, really well. It's a perfect pairing.
If anyone would like to make a comment, now that you've tried both the rye whiskey and the beef tataki, please feel free to unmute yourselves and show yourselves and say something. Otherwise, we'll assume that you're really enjoying the pairing.
They say when the table is quiet, that means the food is delicious.
I'm really impressed with the pairing though, and the thoughtfulness that went into it. And Kris, I think you nailed it. I really do. I was thinking to myself like, well, hopefully he talks a little bit about that fat content and the acidity, and then just like you went right down. I was like, oh man, like this is pretty cool. And I'm sitting here, I still haven't even had breakfast, and I'm starting to salivate.
That was really thorough, actually, Kris. Thanks for like biting really into the whole thing. So
Thank
a
you.
sip of rye, a sip of the rye, and a bite of beef. There you go.
Well, maybe we'll jump on to the next section of the presentation. Thank you, everyone. So I wanted to kind of take the opportunity to talk a little bit about who Sagamore Spirit really is. And our mission statement is very simple. It's to inspire a global passion for Maryland rye whiskey. So I love the fact that we get to talk about our mission statement. It's simple. It's Maryland rye whiskey, but one of the key things in there is global. And so to be sitting here talking with a group around the globe today makes me think we're getting an inching our way closer and closer to inspiring a global passion for Maryland rye whiskey. So it's a great opportunity to be speaking with you all today. So thank you all very much. We get our name from a farm called Sagamore Farm that's located about 22 miles north of downtown Baltimore, where our distillery is located. The farm itself was founded in 1925 by the Vanderbilt family and was very famous for thoroughbred horse racing. But it actually has an interesting history that predates the farm itself. It goes back to 1909 when a guy by the name of Charles A. Councilman built this little spring house from a grant he got from the University of Maryland to study limestone aquifers and their effect on agriculture and livestock. And when you go inside this little house, you'll see there's no floor inside the house, but limestone spring water coming up out of the earth. And we capture that water and we bring it down to the distillery, as I said earlier, and we proof all of our whiskeys into the barrel and into the bottle using this limestone spring water. It's some of the highest quality grade spring water in the mid-Atlantic region of the U.S. And the reason we do that is we kind of like the way it imparts some of the local terroir on it, naturally filtered, so there's no iron in it. Iron can be very bad for whiskey. And it's also rich in calcium, which can help bring out some of the flavor notes and stick to the ester oils and kind of give that local terroir to it. So this is built in 1909. If you ever see our bottle and wonder why it says 1909 on the glass, it's paying homage to this spring house that's located out on our farm. And so that's kind of the epicenter of our story and where we got our name. The farm itself, we don't do horse racing as much anymore. We have a lot of retired horses living on the farm. But we've really spent more of it turning over to supporting the whiskey business. We have one of our 3 whiskey aging barns out there. We have 3 aging barns total. This one's more of our show barn where we put some of our prized whiskey. This one holds a little over 2,200 barrels. And then the other 2 warehouses are much bigger. They're down by the distillery. And they have a capacity between the 3 of them for a little over 63,000 barrels to be held in storage. And we always use new American oak barrels. We never reuse our barrels. And so we have a lot of barrels, obviously. And then when we're done with them, we usually sell them off to Ireland and Scotland for Irish whiskeys and Scotch whiskeys. But what we've really moved into is wanting to own everything from grain to glass, and our dedication to excellence and trying to make the world's best rye whiskey. And so what does that mean? So we started a shared value program with some of our farmers. We work with our farm, Sagamore Farm, as well as 2 other farms in the state of Maryland. And one of the things when we started this project is we were sourcing a lot of grain from Canada, Germany, places like that. But we wanted to start sourcing more and more local. But nobody in the state of Maryland was really growing rye grain, because if they grew it, they only get paid by the government if they actually tilled it back in the earth as a cover crop. And so we could actually never harvest it and be used for whiskey. So we started working with the farmers, and we started saying, well, why don't we help you partner up with you? We'll buy the seed so you have no out-of-pocket expense. We'll share that risk with you. We won't hold you to a yield per acre, but just a quality standard of grain that you need to deliver. We started about 5 years ago, and we had 50,000 pounds. And then the following year, we did about 150,000 pounds. And then we've been scaling it up over time. And we're now harvested over 1 million pounds of rye grain grown in the state of Maryland. And we get 100% of our non-GMO corn from our farm at Sagamore Farm as well. And the reason we do this is, and work like that with the farmers, is actually rye grain is one of the only ones that the government in the U.S. has never subsidized and has never actually, it's one of the only uninsurable crops. So there's a lot of risk to it. So we wanted to partner up with those farmers and share that risk with them and really try to build out something long-term. And we're really impressed with the quality of grain we're now starting to get from Maryland, the flavor notes it's imparting. We're working with the University of Maryland Department of Agriculture on 5 different varietals to really begin to understand the different flavor notes each varietal can impart on the whiskey. So we're extremely dedicated to the local grain and learning as much about this as possible so we can truly become experts, one of the leading experts when it comes to rye whiskey. You see this tool in the picture here. This is a long, I think it's about a 3-meter long probe. When we bring in the big trucks of grain, we go around and we stick that inside the back of the trucks. And we'll take samples from different layers all throughout the truck and bring them into our lab. And we'll analyze the grain for about an hour between moisture content. We'll do organoleptic evaluations. We'll smell it, see if it has any off odors. We'll see how dirty it might be or how clean it needs to be. We'll heat it up. We do a lot to study it, measure it, to make sure it meets our quality standard before we offload it. So we take quality control extremely serious. And to do that, what we think makes some of the best whiskey, it really starts with owning and growing a lot of that grain yourself and understanding it and having that quality control from the very beginning. So that's a little bit about who Sagamore Spirit is, where our name comes from, and then our dedication to really sourcing some of the best grains possible. We'll move on to the next whiskey. This one's really a fun one. It takes exceptional note to this one on the color of the whiskey. It's absolutely it's just beautiful. It's like this bronze copper. And this is our double oak rye whiskey. So what does double oak mean? So we'll take the blend of those two straight ryes, right? We'll age them each separately for about almost 5 years, about 4 years, 9 months. And then we'll blend the two together and we'll put them back into another new American oak barrel. And this barrel is interesting. We call it a wave stave barrel, where you cut grooves down the length of the staves. So it creates these waves all throughout the barrel. It gives about 25% more surface area for the whiskey to bond with the wood. And then instead of doing a heavy char, because it would burn off those waves, we just toast this barrel. And then it goes back in the barrel, this new barrel, again, for 18 more months. So it comes out just a little over 6 years old. And then we'll go ahead and we'll prove it down to 43.3% ABV. And this one is really interesting. The color on it's great. The oils on it are beautiful. A little bit higher in ABV, obviously, and so 48.3% ABV. I apologize, but 48.3% ABV. So a bit higher. So you're going to get more of that baking spice up front. But some of these beautiful, like toasted marshmallow, toasted oakiness, almost like a toasted macaroon, like finish to it. So really fun, very unique. You see some double oak bourbons. You see this a lot in Scotch, obviously, but you don't see it with rye whiskey much. So we thought this would be a really fun one to do. So I'll pause there and we'll again hand it over to Kris and to take it from here.
Awesome, Brian. Obviously, as we've done this before, I've always mentioned that the double oak is my favorite expression out of the three that we're having tonight. And you could just really tell it just has so much complexity. It has that sweetness that you're not really too familiar with that comes in a rye, but at the same time, it has a nice balance because of that higher ABV. So it's not overwhelmingly sweet like a lot of let's say like the younger brother that you have of bourbon. But so, it's a very, very fine mix. I love this bottle. I've probably purchased 2 or 3 of these bottles myself alone. So Miss Bambina, would you be able to explain or describe the food that we paired with this double oak?
Yes, of course, Kris. I think with this double oak, what inspired Chef Pia was obviously the earthiness and the flavors of hazelnut and pecan with vanilla and caramel. It sounds a little more desserty, I think, but I think it also really goes well with a very American dish, which is honey and black pepper cured ribs. And Kris, what can you tell us about that pairing?
So absolutely. So when it comes to food pairing with wine or whiskey or rye or even cigars, you always look for contrast and complementary, right? So those are the type of things that you want to look for. Some flavors will complement each other and some flavors will contrast each other. So like, for example, the first dish that we had with the signature rye, some of those flavors complemented, at the same time they contrasted. This one I feel is a complementary type flavor. The sweetness of the ribs, which were a very nice combination of the honey and the black pepper, went really well with the double oak because of that oakiness and the sweetness that the double oak also has. So both of those flavors combined tend to kind of complement each other and enhance each other's flavor profile. Now, I believe it also came with some kind of an aioli, like a horseradish aioli. And for me, the fact that it had that would help kind of cut some of that sweetness as well. So the chef did a bang up job at kind of putting all these flavors together, because at the same time that she was looking for things that complemented, there was also the things that kind of cut it, so that way it's not too much of the same flavor profile, which I thought was terrific.
Because I think there's a tendency to veer towards sweetness, right? When you have honey and caramel and all that. So what I'm getting from you is that the actual taste of the rye whiskey breaks into it and kind of evens it out so it doesn't become so overpowering or even cloying, right? Sometimes when things are too caramelly or too sweet.
Yes, it definitely does. But at the same time, it also enhances the certain flavor profiles. So for example, you have that honey in the ribs. Now, when you ate the ribs alone, the honey and the black pepper, because the flavors were combined so well and they were cured, you don't really taste them all that much, right? It was more of just like a general, really, really nice, flavorful rib. But when you had the whiskey or the rye with it, it kind of enhanced a little bit of that honey note. So you're able to kind of say, you know what, there really is something different when I have these two together. And that's what I loved about it. So, once again, bang up job by the chef. Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you, Kris. I hope you all enjoyed that as well. Now, if we're talking about a dinner where you're serving whiskey and we start with the beef tataki with one kind of rye whiskey, and then we go to this one. So is that also common to change at an actual dinner, not at the tasting session, but to change whiskeys? Can we do that as well? I mean, we're used to going from red to white or white to red wine. Can we do that as well for whiskey?
Brian, do you want to take this one?
Absolutely, you can do that. You can definitely change things up, and it's fun. I mean, you can even see. I think Kris kind of pointed out it's fun to watch the whiskeys themselves change in front of you a little bit. So when you I love what you mentioned earlier, because this is something I do a lot, and I always really enjoy, is taking a sip of the whiskey, seeing the flavor notes you get from it, taking a bite of the food, and then going back to that whiskey again. And it's another new experience. And then going back to the food, and you can do that with not only changing up by going back to the signature, or you can see what it was like with cask, or you could, what is it like with, a double oak scotch. But I also can go back and add a little bit of water, because all of a sudden when I add a little bit of water to the whiskey, I might start seeing, typically a lot of the nuttiness might come more forward. And things like that. So you can not only change whiskeys, but you can maybe even add a little bit of water to your whiskey. And you, in a sense, as you move that ABV around, you're starting to get different types of experiences within that same whiskey. So that can be a lot of fun too.
I just wanted to point out our wonderful attendees here with their fantastic comments. Like Shihao said, the earthiness really accentuates the sweet and spicy nature of the ribs, and the alioli just resets it so we can have that flavor bomb again. Thank you for that. I think it's a very appropriate description. Would you agree, Kris?
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, that aioli, because the ribs and the rye have like that nice complementary enhancement of sweet and flavor. The aioli just kind of like cuts it down. It's almost like having like a bitter salad in between a nice succulent sweet rib, so that way when you eat another piece of that rib, you can have all those flavors coming at you again. So very, very nice observation, Shihao.
Yeah, the aioli caught my attention for sure, because you can get a little bit of the oils left in your mouth from that, which again, I mean, just gives some really interesting experiences and flavor added to the whiskey as you drink it. So that when I heard the horseradish aioli, that caught my attention.
And there's a bit of tartness, right, coming in that also cuts into the sweetness.
Yep, absolutely.
So Brian,
getting back to what you were saying, Bambina, what Brian was saying, when it comes to having course meals with food, I have been to meals where we started with different regions of Scotch. So you would have, let's say, a sweeter scotch with a certain appetizer, then you would have, let's say, a more earthy or kind of a vegetal scotch or a malty scotch with, let's say, the main course. And then maybe you would have a peated scotch with like a sweet dessert. So kind of the same concept with how we're doing it with rye is, but this is even a better way of combining these flavors, because rye is one spirit and their rye just has different type of subtle flavors. And for the chef and obviously Sagamore to kind of be able to define every single spirit with all the different foods is an accomplishment in itself. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. So compliments again to the chef.
Yeah,
Brian, I know it's
definitely
really early for you there, Brian. Are you getting hungry with all this food?
I'm definitely gonna have a big breakfast. There's no, and it's probably gonna be mostly meat. It's normally like just a yogurt or something, but now I feel like I have to have a bunch of meat. So, but like it is, one of the things that we strive for at Sagamore too is to show the versatility of rye. And so hopefully people are seeing that just even in the first two expressions, that between the signature and the double oak, that they can be very different experiences, even though they're both American rye whiskeys.
Exactly.
So, and then again, the hats off to the chef. I'm always so impressed with how well they, a good chef does their homework and is just so thoughtful. And I mean, it doesn't surprise you. They're so passionate about what they do, and I think they really enjoy these types of pairings.
Oh, Chef Pia loves a challenge. So he loves creating these dishes for us to pair with liquor, alcohol.
That's great. Well, he's definitely good at it. That's for sure. So, just to kind of give you a little bit about our process, in the back of the distillery, we have 3 silos that each hold about, one holds rye, one holds corn, one holds malt, and I should do my quick conversion if I could, but each one holds about 90,000 pounds of grain. So I should have done my homework prior to this. If I apologize, but my math might be way off, so I'm afraid I'm a little nervous to just throw out a number. But I think that's probably I don't even want to speculate. But they're good, sizable silos. Maybe Kris could work on the math for me as I'm throwing them out. And then we'll go ahead. We use a roller mill instead of a hammer mill. We find it's much more consistent grain. We find hammer mills sometimes during striking grain can actually burn some of the grain when it's striking the corn, and it can be very inconsistent. And then you end up with inconsistent starches and sugar. The inconsistent starches before the sugars get exposed. So we really like our roller mill. And then we'll go into our collector bins, our weigh bins, and then we go ahead into our 6,000-gallon cooker, and we do what is called a sour mash, which is a back set. So from every cook prior, the cook the day before, the cook the shift before, we'll bring back usually about a third of what we cooked earlier to start the new cook. And that's called the sour mash technique and a back set. And we do it for a few reasons. One, now we're using less water, and it's still heated from the cook before, so it really helps with energy and water and sustainability. And then it also really helps with consistent flavoring, which we think is incredibly important, and it helps balance a pH, which is very, very important before going into fermentation. So we do what's a sour mash back set in our cooker, and then we'll go ahead and after we cook for about 6 hours, we'll go ahead and pitch out to one of our 9 6,500-gallon fermenters, and then we'll do a 3 to 4 day open top fermentation, which we really like. And we kind of let some of that natural flora and fauna of our region get into it with that open top fermentation. From there, we'll go into our beer well, and we call it a beer well because at this point we've done nothing more than what really a brewery would do. And when we come out of fermentation, we're usually about 8% ABV, 9% ABV. So we're not a high proof spirit. And then we'll go ahead and feed it through what we call a beer still or a column still. So we have a column still that's about 40 feet tall, mirror polished column copper, has 19 distillation trays. So each time going through polishing that spirit, removing the grain, we hit it with a tremendous amount of steam and heat. Obviously, alcohol evaporates at a different rate than water. So we're stripping out the water. We're sending those alcohol vapors back up through our condensers, reconverting them back into alcohol and running it. And we do a triple distillation. So we'll go once through the column still, hitting those 19 distillation trays. Then we'll go through a doubler one, where we continue to polish the distillate, raising the proof again. And that's doublers similar to a thumper or kind of like a mini pot still. And then we'll go through the condenser again before going through the final and third distillation of our second doubler. And then we'll come off the still at usually around 67, 68% ABV. So one of the things is, to be a straight rye whiskey, we can never go above 80% ABV. Because once you do that, you start to approach what we call a neutral grain spirit, or vodkas, basically, and we've stripped out the flavor notes that we want associated with American whiskey. So we can't go above 80%. We usually don't go much above 68%, to be perfectly honest, because we like the flavor notes that we're starting to get there. It's a triple distillation, and once we do that process, that takes about 8 hours. We'll go ahead and send it over to our processing center, and we'll proof it from usually about 67%, 68% ABV down to 60% ABV into the barrel. And as I mentioned, it's always a new American oak barrel with a char number 4, sometimes a char number 3, depending on what we're trying to accomplish, and then the toasted wave stave barrel for the double oaks. And then we'll roll it out to our barrel warehouses for 4 to 8 years, and then bring it back, and we use the spring water, proof it down to bottle proof, whatever the product may be. And so that kind of gives you a little bit of an insight onto our fermentation, distillation, aging, and bottling. We don't condition our warehouses where we age. We paint them black. We like them to get incredibly hot. So they get around 125, 126 Fahrenheit on the top floor in the summer. And then in the winter, we can see freezing temperatures inside our warehouses. So it really expands that whiskey in and out of that charred wood. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the seasons. We're looking to see how hard we can push that whiskey out into the wood to collect those wood sugar notes. That's where you get the caramels, the vanillas, things along those lines. And then every time it goes in and out of that char, it kind of helps filter out some of the oils that we don't necessarily want. And so it's about seasons, it's about extremes, it's about heat, it's about cold. We really like that. And then it's very much about just being in a natural environment. We don't move our barrels around the warehouse. We know what each barrel does on each floor. The ones on the top floor tend to go a lot higher in proof. The ones on the bottom floor tend to go a little bit down in proof. The middle stays right about the same. And so it's just a matter of understanding your warehouses. We have weather stations in there that measure humidity and heat, so we understand what we're experiencing in there throughout the year, and just really let Mother Nature do the work for us. So here's a picture of our distillery downtown Baltimore. You can see the water tower there for the spring water from the farm. Directly in front of us is where we do all of our distillation, cooking, and fermentation. The building to the right is where we do all of our barrel filling, barrel dumping. We also have a visitor center, tasting room, a cocktail lounge. Picture of it here at night. Get a little bit of a closer picture. So that's our column still, or our beer still. It's made by Vendome out of Louisville, Kentucky. They pretty much make almost everybody American whiskey stills. They've been making stills since the 1800s, a family-owned business. And it took 12 men over 1,200 hours to make that still by hand. And we call her Penny. She's shiny like a penny here in the States, and she makes beautiful whiskey. And then you can see in the bottom, each one of those small little copper doublers for that we run for the triple distillation. So we come away with a very clean, very beautiful, very polished distillate off that still. Here's kind of an aerial picture of it. As I said, the far building is where we do all our distilling, fermentation, and cooking. The middle building is where we do all of our barrel filling, bottling, our visitor center. We do our cocktail tours and tasting. You can see all of our outdoor space. We have a lot of music on the weekends, and we do events. Tonight we're doing a big cocktail showdown tonight with a bartender from the West Coast that we've been doing all year, then the Central, and then the East Coast. We picked a bartender from each one of those regions in their own cocktail competition. Then tonight we brought all three of those bartenders here to our distillery for the final showdown, which we'll host in the lawn. And then the building with the gray roof is our restaurant. And so you can come hang out. You can see the city of Baltimore in the background. We're located right in downtown Baltimore, right on the waterfront. So hopefully someday you get a chance to visit us. And then we have a small 250-gallon pot still batch system. This is for some of our small projects, some of our research and development. We'll experiment with different mash bills. We have some projects that are 100% Maryland grain, 100% Maryland oak wood, 100% Maryland water, and a lot of those tend to be smaller. To give you an idea, the big column still, we can make 15 53-gallon barrels every 8 hours. This one makes a half a barrel every 8 hours. So to kind of give you an idea of output, basically if we run 3 shifts a day off the big still, we'll get 45 barrels. If we ran 3 shifts a day off of this, we get 1.5. So quite a bit different as far as output, but it's great to have for a little research and development. And we call this still Edgar in honor of a guy who lived here in Baltimore called Edgar Allan Poe. So our final pairing, and some may have already moved on maybe, our cask strength. Our cask strength is exactly that. It's bigger, it's bolder. It is usually around 56, 58% ABV. So we'll age 4 to 7 years. It's very similar blend of the 2 straight mash bills as the very first rye you tried tonight, but I think you're going to see it's quite a bit different, obviously at that higher percent ABV. So I'll back off now and let Kris wrap it up here.
Awesome, Brian. This cask strength rye whiskey, for me, the last time that I had this, I believe I mentioned to you that I actually like this with a little bit of water added in. It kind of enhances a lot more of those hydrophilic and hydrophobic kind of molecules within that whiskey. So it really, really made sense to me to just add just a little bit of water. But by itself, even only at 56.1%, it's fantastic. So Miss Bambina, would you mind going over the food real quick? The dessert?
Absolutely. Thanks, Kris. I think you're enjoying right now a bitter chocolate tart, caramelized peach and butterscotch to garnish. And again, Chef Pia was very much inspired by how well this went with chocolate, because as you can see from the flavor profile, there's dark chocolate, black pepper, brown sugar, and honey, as well as bold cinnamon, clove, and vanilla. So all these things lend themselves really well to dessert. And we don't normally offer this bitter chocolate tart. It's not on the menu, but we do offer it for bespoke meals and, catered executive lunch boxes or dinner boxes. So if you'd like us to make it for you, please just let us know and Chef will be happy to make it for you. So Chef Pia loves doing these little things. And he also has a special proclivity for peaches. He always likes to throw in peaches whenever he can. And so he's put these all together, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Bambina. The bitter chocolate tart with the peaches, the caramelized peaches and the butterscotch. I mean, that's a very, very flavorful little dessert. I mean, look how small it is, yet it's so flavorful. And something like the signature, the Sagamore Rye cask strength I felt out of all these three expressions was the only one that could stand up against this tart because of those delicious flavors. I mean, talk about bitter chocolate. It has a strong flavor profile. The butterscotch, right? I mean, people always talk about describing butterscotch when it comes to tasting whiskey, but not a lot of people have actually been able to eat it. So the fact that you're able to get that flavor profile within this dessert, along with the Sagamore cast strength, it really lends for a perfect pairing. I mean, you're talking about like contrasting flavors and not so much kind of letting one win over the other. So it's a perfect balance. Before we actually move on, I want to just acknowledge someone that's with us tonight. He's actually a bartender from Solaire, and his name is Lawrence Gabriel. He was the guy that made this drink called the Epiphany, and he won the Sagamore Rye Bartender Challenge back, I believe, in March. Was that? It was before things were so strict, and we were still able to go to certain places and enjoy things. And I believe there were about it was a tough competition. They had to go through a couple of rounds and make a few different drinks in order for them to get there. And once they got there, the drink that he had, I was there with another gentleman as a co-judge, and we both picked the first, second, and third place. We all had the same marks, and it was it was blind. Like we didn't say, hey, compare these notes, compare these notes. What do you think of this? We scored everything independently, and then at the end, all our scores matched up, which meant all their drinks, like the first, second, and third place, deserved to be there. And his drink, I remember reading from his notes and mine. The first thing that we said was so complex yet so beautifully kind of blended together. So Lawrence, if you're there, I just wanna say, a big shout out to you to kind of talk about like your drink, the Epiphany. And if people is Solaire allowing people right now? Because it would be a shame for some of our patrons to not try that drink themselves.
Hi, Kris. Thanks for the description. It's very amazing, as always. Yeah, so my drink is called Epiphany. So as we all know, Epiphany means a sudden realization of something. And I believe when you taste my drink, you will realize that rye is really a versatile spirit when it comes to cocktail. So I constructed my cocktail as what we said, very complex but yet simple. The template is like a Boulevardier, whiskey, Campari, and vermouth. So what I made is, instead of just using Campari, I mixed 6 different Amaros. And then the sweet vermouth, I infused it with wasabi to have to add a different layer of spiciness to the rye. So yeah, that's it. And yeah, Solaire is open for fully vaccinated people. If you want to come and try my drink, you can visit me there from 5 p.m. to 2 a.m.
But Lawrence, let's have you over at Manila House maybe one day, and you can make it for us.
Sure. I would love to.
Show them how to make it, right? So we can enjoy this drink in Manila House as well.
I would love to, Ms. Bam.
Thanks. It's an honor to have you here. Brian, I just wanted to note that we're very jealous. It seems to be, back to normal there in Baltimore with lots of things going on and people getting together. We're still a little wary in the Philippines about doing that,
Yeah, some parts of the U.S. have handled it very well. Others maybe not so much. But I think we're at in Maryland, we're at about 85% vaccination rate right now. So things are getting better. We still wear masks at work every day. I think we've gotten to the point where we are good about navigating it a little bit, but we're still cautious too. I was flying the other day. You can't get on any public transportation, or like I said, you can't go to places in the city of Baltimore without having to still wear a mask. I think that's the right thing, and just to continue to try and make things under try and keep things contained as best we can. And you know, you try not to get overly excited about maybe this getting behind us soon, but you know, I think the worst of it is behind us. I hope.
I hope so. I really hope so. Yeah, and I hope we'll be there. I think we're getting there. So maybe we're a couple of months behind you, but I think we're well on our way there. Especially in the NCR. I mean, the recent numbers have been very encouraging. So for those who haven't been vaccinated yet, please go and get your vaccines. I think maybe I'd like to invite all of you, if you don't mind, to turn on your cameras and maybe join us for a group shot. And then we'd like to maybe we'll pick out, we've put all your names, all the attendees in a basket, and we're gonna pick out the winner of the raffle. And Quenby, would you like to tell us what the winner will get today?
Hello, everybody. I'm glad you're all here enjoying Sagamore and the food from Manila House. I can't imagine a better pair for tonight. We are raffling off a bottle of Sagamore Signature. Just like this one. So everybody who's here, who's able to attend, please stay on, and Bambina will do the raffle. I think you did the raffling early on, right, Bambina?
Yes, we put all your names in a basket, so to speak, and so we picked out one.
Before you say the winner, I just want to say, guys, please notice how pretty our bottle is. It's not unlike any other whiskey bottle. It's really from Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a perfume manufacturing company that you actually got this bottle from. Is it something like that? I think you're on mute.
It's one of the historic rye whiskey companies from the 1800s had a similar bottle. So we took it and did a little bit of a modern day spin on it, but it's to pay tribute to all the historic distillers in Maryland used to use like hand-blown glass back in the day.
So very pretty.
Before I read out today's winner, just remember that you can order these bottles from us at Manila House, and just give us a call or send us an email at events@manilahouseinc.com, and we'd be happy to take your orders. So according to the Magic Basket, our winner for tonight is none other than Robbie Delgado. Congratulations, Robbie. You win those beautiful bottles.
I hope with liquid inside.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's the
can
first
enjoy
time I win
bottle.
anything.
Really?
Congratulations, Robbie.
Thank you very much.
So-
Shall we have a picture of this group?
Yes, please.
Who's gonna do
Are-
that?
Will you do the honors?
I'll do the screenshot. Smile,
Yes.
everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Does
Awesome,
anybody have
awesome.
any questions for Brian or for Bambina regarding the whiskey and the food, or Manila House is open already? So Bambina, you might want to re-invite everybody again.
Yes, please. Just bring your proof of vaccination. We're happy to welcome you, our members and their guests, to Manila House anytime. And hopefully the weather is improving, so you have use of we have several outdoor spaces for you to, to enjoy safely. And of course, our indoor spaces are also open, subject to the IATF rules. And Manila House has the safety seal as well from the gig LGU. So you're in really good hands. Our staff has been vaccinated as well.
Yes.
So,
Great job, guys. Thank you very much, Kris and Brian, Bambina. My goodness.
Yeah.
Thank you for fixing that win for me.
But and in behalf of Sagamore Philippines, I want to say thank you again to Brian, the president of Sagamore USA. It's early morning there, and he always joins us to promote Sagamore here in the Philippines. So Brian, thank you again for joining us today. Bambina, maraming salamat for partnering with Sagamore. to do this pairing tonight. I think it was a beautiful pair, according to Kris, and I think from the comments tonight. Thank you for allowing Sagamore to be part of Manila House's evening tonight. Kris, thank you again for always supporting Sagamore. You did a wonderful job tonight, and I really hope that we can do more of this. If you guys have any events, a wedding, birthday, if you want to do a Manila House Sagamore pairing, just let Bambina know, and we will be able to do this for you anytime.
Yes, thank you again for joining all of us. Thank you, Brian, for waking up so early. Thank you, Kris, for your wonderful hosting, and Quenby, of course, for making this all happen. Thank you to all our participants. And yeah, you can see this on YouTube if you want to go back and, to the notes, to the tasting notes. This will be up on YouTube in a day or so.
RC,
So,
thank you also, RC.
yes, thank you, RC, for all your
Thank
help.
you guys so much. Thank you all.
Enjoy the rest. I hope you didn't finish those bottles yet, because you can still drink some more. It's for more than one shot, right? Or is it a one?
Exactly.
No,
No, it's more.
I had never been a rye drinker, and I thank you for introducing me to rye, because I've never tried it before. I've been bourbon and Scotch and Irish, but rye is something I never really experienced. So thank you very much. It opened my eyes to something really wonderful.
Thank
Yay,
you.
congratulations, Mr. Delgado.
Congratulations.
Thanks
All
very
right.
much.
You have a
Okay.
good evening, everyone, and see you again
Bye.
soon. Next
Good night.
event.
Thank you, Glenby.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Thank you.
Gina, Brian.
Good
Kris.
night. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Lauren, salamat.
Thank you, Quenby.
Is that it? Everyone's gone now?
Not yet.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Shalen, with your you said
Your big
there were
group.
7 of you there. Yeah, big group. I hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, Bambina. Thanks, Quenby, for allowing me to
Great.
host
Thanks
this
so
evening.
much.
Chris, always. Galing mo.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thumbs up, man.
Don't lang
Till
promote
Till our
another
next tasting.
next time.
What's that?
Don't promote another hotel next time.
Kaya nga sabi nga ni Quenby, oh, don't stop saying Cliff. But I'd love to come and do like a live tasting over at Manila House. I mean,
Yeah.
as I
One
told
day we'll
RC,
do that.
I'm good
love
friends with
to.
Errol, so we've been there a bunch of times, and I love that outdoor patio. that you
Errol,
guys
yeah,
have,
of course, of course. What happened to Errol? We were asking Mark and Errol to join. I don't know where, if they're in town.
He's in California. Actually,
That's right.
he's in San Fran right now. So they went
Wow.
home because his kids have no opportunity to kind of
Yeah.
do outdoor activities until we go back to
I know it's terrible.
MGCQ. So
Yeah,
parang
Got it.
Terrible.
medyo
Yeah.
malayo-layo pa.
We've done tasting also with single malt PH before with Chris also. Yeah. But not food pairing. This is the first time we're doing a food pairing. So very nice.
Food, because I didn't have it.
Me
It was,
rin eh, Chris
I
and
know
RC.
they hadn't
Very,
finalized
very
the
good.
menu yet when I left. Good, good. And the servings were really like that. Parang how big, di ba, RC?
Big.
Yeah, it's
Tapos,
Parang
Kala
for
ko
3 people, di ba?
yeah, that's a
I don't
full.
know about that.
Ano naman.
either three light eaters or one eater like me.
Said we told chef tapas size. He made it pala so big.
yeah.
Very, very
Good.
nice.
Sulit. At least people feel sulit the food.
I think
Also.
so. I think so. I think so.
Wow. Okay, guys. Thanks
Okay.
so much. Na rin
Thank
there.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank-
Chris. Thanks, Bambina. Thanks, RC.
Soon.
Good night.
Thank you. Good
Okay.
night.
Thanks, RC. Night. Bye.